Hello, mic testing.
Can you say something?
Mic testing.
Mic is Hi guys, welcome to another episode of Unotumbler, and you would have heard about Tech Bros. Today I have with me FinTech Bros. So, hi guys, hi Aditya, hi Rajeev.
Hey everyone.
Welcome to the show and welcome to the video. And this is the founding team of a startup called Numberz, right? Numberz, for those who are aware about the FinTech ecosystem, this is a company which has been acquired by Chargebee, right? And today they both have graciously agreed to spend some time and give us some gyan and some insights into what their journey has been, right? I'll quickly hand it over to you guys to just give a quick introduction about yourself and let our viewers know what your journey has been and how you've come to be where you are at this point in time. So anyone can start, please.
Hey guys, I'm Aditya. I was the co-founder CEO at Numberz. My journey was almost like a full circle in life. Okay, I was born in this typical Marwadi family in Calcutta, where the moment you're born, your fate is decided. You're either going to be a chartered accountant or you're going to be a trader, right? And almost every second person in my family was a chartered accountant while growing up, and all the discussions used to be on stock market, balance sheets, etc. So I think after all those years of being hit by all those conversations, I decided that no, I will not do anything to do with accounts or finance. I'm going to be an engineer. Okay. So I ended up doing engineering.
Black sheep ऐसे ही होते हैं family.
And exactly. Then after my engineering, I thought I want to do something that's still on the business side. So I did my MBA from ISB Hyderabad, and then joined a consulting firm. Okay, and worked across the globe, and then eventually I joined a company called Intuit, which was a Silicon Valley based tech company, and I was responsible for a part of the business team that was responsible for starting the business in India. Mm-hmm. And as part of the business, it was a great experience. And then I still remember the first time I was speaking in an international conference. It was a chartered accountant conference in Calcutta. My brother and my father were sitting on the front table, okay, and they were laughing at me because I was trying to sell accounting software to chartered accountants. So that was a full circle for me. I mean, something that I ran away from, I ended up selling accounting software. That was very, I think that was also the place that got me excited about the opportunity on the financial kind of software space. We saw, a huge excitement in that area. And from there, basically, we realized that we could do something together. Then I and Rajeev, who were batchmates at ISB. Mm-hmm. And one thing led to the other, and we started off a journey at his Numberz.
Super. What about you? Are you also a complete rock star like him? No.
Unlike Aditya, who was very clear about this entrepreneurship journey, I was the exact opposite. Mm-hmm. So which essentially meant that if I were to give like a name to the journey, mm-hmm. I would call myself as a very reluctant entrepreneur.
Okay.
I was a mechanical engineer by background, so like a true blue tam-ram, getting into engineering college was my first duty, which I did. Started my career off in automotive sector with Tata Motors and Ford, and it generally took me across the country, learning or working with businesses, with dealerships, etc. And then after a few years, my wife definitely told me that I am less learned than her. I don't have enough degrees, so she pushed me into doing something around MBA, which I did, and I had the unfortunate pleasure of being your classmates. That definitely helped me at least gain a bit of understanding and a bit of selfish entrepreneurship journey, which was purely to do with credits and nothing more. And in fact, that was the first venture that we've created. It was like selling paintings and craftsmen and all that stuff. Yes.
PAEV, it is called PAEV.
It is called PAEV.
Okay.
And with another group, I think you were a part of it also, which was, they were into community radio. So that was
Yeah.
another wedge.
Yeah.
Right? We were dabbling with things, and that's where my entrepreneurship journey ended at that point in time. Joined Coke, worked in sales and marketing there. Again, working with small businesses. Now this time, very small businesses, 2 large corporates, but selling them 5 rupee Coke bottle across the board, and maybe even selling water also. One thing led to the other. I used that knowledge to join a tech company called SAS, which was into analytics, and which is where my brush with complex sales or large business, large value sales came about. Helped SAS establish their retail and FMCG vertical. And then again, internally within SAS, one thing led to the other. My portfolio increased to also create the defense and aerospace vertical for SAS. So now working with the complexity increase. Now I was also working with government officials to sell them CDs instead of now 5 rupee bottles. And spent about 5 years there. And it was during that time, towards the end of that stint, is a coffee shop in Ambience Mall in Gurgaon. I and this ex-colleague of mine, we were spitballing some ideas as to what we were doing in Coke. Can we do it somewhere else? And that is where a few things fell in place. And I jumped headlong into my first startup called Creative Assumptions, which was a creative agency. Bootstrapped, working with large businesses, doing a whole lot of stuff, not knowing where we were heading.
And what were you looking at? What were you doing over there?
What we were doing was...
like you. I mean, what was your...
So my job role there was both BD, managing GTM, as well as the execution of that in the northern part of the country. So my partner was managing the southern part of the country. Interesting times, and exact 2 years we ran it to the ground, purely for the reasons of working capital, etc., etc. Now it was that time when this person called Aditya Tulsian came in as a knight in shining armor and sold me QuickBooks. So he said, hey, here is what QuickBooks is all about. This is going to solve all your problems.
QuickBooks बेच दिया उसको.
एक नहीं 5 license बेचे.
Oh God.
For one company, right? But what we also realized was so what I did not know was Creative Assumptions was also kind of a guinea pig for figuring out what at that point in time an idea could solve. Issues around working capital, how can small businesses continue to never run out of money or manage certain things. So yeah, one thing led to the other, and obviously, like I said, we were in a downward spiral with Creative Assumptions with a whole lot of challenges around working capital and with the ideas around numbers. We kind of joined forces together.
Excellent. So, I mean, already I think it's quite visible the kind of entrepreneurial, the bent of mind that you can kind of see. So, I think we've already touched upon a bit on your journeys, right? So, how did the idea of starting Numberz come about, right? How did it go about, right? Was it something like immediate moment that kind of caught your attention, or you felt that there was a gap, right? So this is a question that I get from a lot of people. शुरू कैसे करें? How do I start, right? I mean, ideas are diamond dozen, we know that, right? So and then when you look at ideas, you also realize यार ये भी हो रखा है, ये भी हो रखा है, ये भी हो रखा है, right? So I think that will be very helpful to kind of understand how did you guys kind of start?
Sure. So as I said, I was working with Intuit, and as part of my work at Intuit India, I started the very first experiment outside of, in Asia for QuickBooks.
Okay.
And QuickBooks was Intuit's leading accounting software, SaaS-based accounting software, QuickBooks Online. And during that journey, I had to meet a lot of small businesses. I mean, as you said, like Creative Assumptions. And I used to meet a lot of these companies, and I used to think that QuickBooks is a great solution. It's going to help simplify people's day-to-day financial management problem. And what a root shock came to me after, let's say, almost 2 years of doing that, was none of the entrepreneurs wake up in the morning and say my accounting is broken. Right? They don't lose sleep because their accounting is broken. They lose sleep on they have a cash flow problem. Right? That how are they going to make payments? Okay, or how much money do they have to? They do the required to make the payments in the month. How much money do they have to collect, etc., etc. That day-to-day cash flow management is where the real problem is. And it wasn't just a software problem. It wasn't that if you just give them the sexiest software in the world, the problem will be solved.
Right.
It was also the fact that there was a gap between the financial services available in the market and what the needs for the small businesses were. Okay. So while this thing, kept hitting me for quite some time, okay, but I didn't have a solution for it. Around about in 2014-ish, okay, there was a company called Fundbox in the US. Fundbox was partnering with QuickBooks in the US to use the QuickBooks accounting data to help small businesses get invoice financing or invoice-based financing. And that's what struck. If the platform has the data, can the data be used as an alternative way to help financial services companies, help these small businesses
improve their cash flow?
So that is what was, I would say the genesis of this whole idea.
The aha moment.
Yeah, and actually I think that there was never an aha moment, because it was like, this is a problem, but this is a real big problem. How is going to solve it? Right. It was, I think it was almost a 6 to 9 month journey in my head.
But tell me something, when you looked at this idea and then you kind of said ki, this is what I'm kind of looking to do, and you obviously would have researched, right, gone to Google and checked and all. So और भी मिले होंगे ऐसे softwares, there would be kind of people who will be doing something like this. What was your reaction then?
My reaction actually, let me come to that specific question, in a bit, but let me tell you how I finally arrived that this was a big opportunity. Right. It was actually when I met people like Rajeev, okay, and I started talking to them. I asked them, how are you managing your cash flow? Then he would show me this glorified Excel sheet, okay, and I was like, really? I mean, this is the amount of effort you put into build your cash flow management, whatever he was doing, and the first reaction was, this guy is from ISB, man. Okay, if someone like him and who's also decently tech savvy, he has to put so much effort. What about someone who's a bit more novice? And so I actually spoke to a lot of customers, okay, because they were using QuickBooks, and I used to go and ask them, but what about your cash flow? How are you managing that? So that's what started coming in. So what I found, at least in India, that there was no software like that. Okay, there were a lot of accounting softwares. Got it. Okay, but there was no software that was really helping them think about cash flow.
So there's no software just pulling the data and basically doing some work on it
and of course there was no financial services company that was using that data to give them. So this opportunity in India wasn't there. And Fundbox was also very new in the US. Right, it must have been only a year and a half of their existence when I started seeing them.
Right.
So therefore there was no competition, right? And the second thing that I now think about, competition is that if there's competition, there's almost a validation that the idea that it works, right? When there's no competition, you actually have to work much harder to prove that I hope I wasn't doping, right? And this is just not my fanciful imagination, in a locked room that this problem exists, right? So sometimes I think that having competition or having existing solutions is actually a very good way to start, because it sort of validates, because that is the biggest challenge, because when you come up with something that you think it's new to the world or new to the market, right, what you don't know is that why wasn't it solved before? Okay, is it a black box thing that you don't have an answer, and therefore you have to find it only when you launch, or people have tried and failed and therefore it's not going to work out, right? So sometimes I think that it's absolutely okay to have existing players, and I would rather then spend time learning about them, understanding where the gaps are, what they're doing, what they're not doing, and then use that as a way to launch something.
And from my side, so it was the other side of the table, right? Where I had, and think about it, with whatever pedigree, whatever connections that you have, you obviously can walk into a room. You do have that leeway. And we had large customers. We're talking about Pernod Ricard India, HDFC Bank, Mars Chocolates. These are large paymasters large enterprises who are not supposed to have any cash challenges. So which means
still you guys were
if I get into the door, I know that I would be paid. But because it is capital intensive, now for me to collect my own monies and then make sure that the payment that I'm making to my vendors, all of them is in tandem while we are also making profits and growing the business, right? So that is the core competence that usually businesses will have. But instead of that, what were we spending most of our time on was on making sure that somebody pays, right? Not executing the project, but hey, how do I manage my collections? How do I manage my payables? How do I manage? Is there any way in which I can raise money from the market against whatever invoices that I already have? And remember that we're talking about 14-15 period, right? This was a time when there was no GST, P2P lending was still not there, invoice discounting was still finding its feet. And when Aditya was also working on this idea, and again, this was the second spitballing session for me, right? When we were discussing all of this, this was another validation of the ideas that were getting germinated to say that, hey, how can we work with small businesses so that they can focus on what they are best at or good at, while can we give them an operating system that will help them manage their finances? Can we help them manage their money in, money out? Can we help them anticipate the difference and give them with more cash flows, whether it is call as credit? I mean, slowly the idea kind of came about, fructified into like a platform which technology can help.
Got it.
And remember again, at that time there were no automated invoices, there was no GSTR 1, 2, 3 which was getting filed and so on and so forth, which means that data is also not there, so loans are difficult to get and so on and so forth, right? So it was a right time for a technology solution to kind of disrupt this area, but it was, like you said, it was born out of a real need, which is right there, and the existing solutions did not fit the bill. No accounting solution or QuickBooks, like in my case, could not help me solve the problem, even though they were saying they would.
So
they were saying they would, right?
Silu. That's a good one. So okay, so I think it's a great example of how the founding team kind of comes together, right? So there is obviously an idea that there is some requirement in the market, and you identify a gap. But on the other hand, one member of the founding team has actually experienced it on the other side, right? So he's gone through the pain. So one person is coming up and saying, this is the idea, what do you think? And the other person says, boss, I've experienced this myself, right? So I think that's a great kind of melting pot, right, to kind of start, right? Because you then tend to look at the problem from both the angles.
Right.
So I think one question that I want to know, Numberz. How did the name come about? Right, that's a very interesting. Don't tell me. Don't tell me.
So you talk about numbers. I'll talk about something before that. Okay?
Go ahead, please.
So when we began, and we had this brilliant thought of calling it Get Fiscal.
Get Fiscal.
Remember that here we were new kid on the block. You wanted to disrupt a very serious market.
Right.
We are talking about hardcore numbers and finances and all that stuff, right? Which means as a startup, we want to be known. And we were, what were we dealing in? Hardcore numbers, money in, money out, etc.
Correct.
So our first name that we had come up with was Unbarrier, and we did a whole lot of rounds. We finally converged on this cool name called Get Fiscal.
So help me understand. Get Fiscal is a play on Get Physical?
And that is where it died a sad death. That is how it began. Okay. So yes.
Okay.
Our teams.
No shame in it, man.
Yeah,
it's okay.
absolutely.
It's okay. So.
Well, to have a very clear conscious, we did not think about Get Physical when we started. We ended up being called Get Physical.
Of course, when you say Get Physical, people will call you Get Physical.
Our thoughts have always been as pure as.
Absolutely. Completely agree.
Yeah. So, but then when we were doing it, because it is fiscal and it's different, it's a pun for all the intelligent people out there. But it turns out to be that is not how the world works.
Right.
So when we went there and when we had this fledgling team and when they were pitching to the customers, and especially when you're doing it over phone, and then especially when you're doing it to an owner or a business person who's not male, it can go either way. It can go anywhere else, right? And depending upon how you end up pronouncing it.
Right.
So
you actually launched with that name.
Yes.
And then you guys.
No, we still have our business cards.
Wow.
Yeah, so we had our brochures, we had a
by the way,
something to be framed.
we had a website.
You have a website as well?
Yeah, I think for 9 months we ran with it. More than that. By the way, our first round of funding was under the name of Get Fiscal.
Oh really? Wow. Okay, all right. That's an interesting piece of
And then numbers.
Yeah.
So what we realized was when we start talking to our customers, okay, we realized one of the most important pieces for a business owner, okay, is getting the money in, okay, and if they don't have money in the bank, okay, they will never be able to meet their targets, right? And if you think about a very colloquial word of target, okay, is that you need to meet your numbers, right? So our idea was that we help you meet your numbers. Okay.
Got it.
So we'll work your numbers in a way that we help you meet your numbers. Right. And the other reason we did that was because I still remember someone told us that you have to when you think of your name, okay. And by the way, as a background, my wife runs a branding agency.
Right.
Okay. So she used to help a lot of companies do that.
Entrepreneur 101, right? Huh? Always look inside the house and get done work for free. Right?
that's the most bootstrapped way.
Most bootstrapped way to go about it. Don't pay any money to your wife and ask her to do branding. I'm sure she would be charging a bomb with clients.
So one thing that she had always told me was that always pick up a name that people. It's very easy to remember. Okay, and so that's when we sort of thought that. No matter what type of business you are in, okay, the word numbers will always be in your jargon. Right? Whether you are in the, you're a CFO, whether you are a salesperson, whether you're the owner, or whether you're production, or any business, the word numbers will always be in your terminologies. So hence we realized that this is this can be a play where we would always be mentioned, okay, and eventually people will always remember our name.
Right.
So that's how it basically started, that we, numbers will help you meet your numbers.
Right. No, I think that's...
No, and even from a marketing angle standpoint, right? We wanted to say things like, are your numbers ready? Or get your numbers, get your business ready for numbers. Or do your numbers right? Is your business, have you numbers your business yet? Which ultimately became a kind of a tagline, right? For us, have you numbers your business yet? And the way we also designed the logo, and again we are Neha, where we are the owner of the place where we are sitting right now. Bootstrap, right?
Bootstrap, absolutely.
She also helped us create a thought starter when we showed somebody our business cards, which meant that the numbers was written in a way which had the way money is showcased in Indian monetary system, right? With commas and all that. And we also wanted to give this sense that doing your numbers is easy. And so every business card also had a story. I mean, your business should not be like finding a parking slot. Have you done your numbers yet, or something like that, right? So it became, the numbers then not only became a differentiator, but it would also became a conversation starter, because we would give our business cards upside down. Because on the flip side of it was this story. So it was an interesting way in which we were trying to at least showcase ourselves when we were first meeting somebody.
No, fabulous. I think to sum it up, definitely numbers is a much better name than Get Physical. Get Physical. All right, great. So cool. So I think one thing which is very very interesting about your journey is obviously you guys started off, then you guys ended up raising money, and then you guys have also seen an exit, right? But it's been a good happy kind of story, like now when we put it like that, right? But obviously it just kind of it takes a lot, right? I mean, it takes a lot in terms of kind of you guys coming together and then walking through the entire journey and all, right? So essentially let me start with one starting point, taking the leap as co-founders. How did that happen? What were the discussions that you had?
So actually, more than just the fact that we were batchmates, okay, at ISB we were also quaddies.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
And we had done quite a few projects together. Okay. And Actually, we were actually very thick friends, right? And post ISB also, when he was always married. Okay, when I got married, our wives also got along extremely well. So there was always a very strong mutual trust between us. So when we were discuss the concept of coming together, I don't think that was something that we ever thought ye kaise kaam karega. Okay, we almost thought ye to kaam karega hi. Right? And then the only piece that we just had to figure out was what roles will each of us play.
That's important.
Yeah. So that part was what was something that, because to some extent we were from very similar backgrounds. We were engineers, MBA on the business side, right? So that was a part that we had to always think about. Okay. And but I think that wasn't very difficult either, because we still figured out this is my role as a CEO, this is your role as a COO, this is someone else's role as a product guy, right? So that was not too complicated to get started on.
What about you?
And I think I would concur completely. So it was more about the belief in the idea that this might work. I think we never had a doubts about then what will happen, and we knew that this will also evolve. And by the way, like you said, I'm a complete believer in the fact that working single-handedly, it's near impossible. And this kind of worked for me before, no matter what the results, even now, and the way I see the other startups also working. At least it takes the load off in a very, very big way, even in small and large ways that we don't even foresee at the beginning of things.
But tell me something, I mean, as you guys.
But I'll just add just a couple of things, because what very rightly mentioned, and this is something that I've seen when I speak to multiple founders also, right, is when the businesses are over, when the roles are a little overlapping, how do you then decide on the swim lanes? How do you decide who will do what? And in our case, I think the unique thing was, while both of us were looking at the business side of things, the key differentiator was, let's say, the ideation or this something new that is getting evolved. That was pretty much decided as to who that guy is going to be, and how will that translate into reality. Who will be more in the depths of the details, etc., etc., was decided. So in that sense, it was the things fit well together. Then at the same time, what about the other elements? Let's say I would usually come in from more of a people and process centric stuff. Aditya would come in more from a numbers centric stuff, and more hard coded stuff. And this is critically needed at all stages of an organization, right? And both the things, right? You have to make sure that the morale is there. You also need to make sure that you ask the hard things, and so in that sense, we needed a yin and a yang, to quote the right things. I don't know who the villain was, but I guess those things, some of those things evolved. It took time for us to figure out how the roles would be, but more or less we knew where things fit.
But like I was saying, so my question was that obviously you guys were, you knew each other and you were good friends and all, right? Doesn't that also have a risk of knowing the other person too well, or let's say put a strain on your friendship, so to speak? Because obviously you're doing business together now, right? I mean being roommates and doing like projects and all is different, but now you were in something which was like sink or swim for both of you, right? What was that like? I mean, obviously there is familiarity, but then there are other things that kind of always pop up, right?
Yeah. So the way when we started, of course, we didn't think like that. Okay.
It's
and
that's not what we do.
Yeah, exactly. But now I can tell you this is that the moment you think that you're going to start with your friend, right, and you are, especially in your startup journey, you are going to spend more time with that individual than you're spending with anyone else.
Right.
Forget about your family, but anyone else collectively. Right. And at some point of time, there is a fatigue that sets in. So it's then on you how you keep that thing going. And I think what really worked for us was that our wives were far more smarter than we were.
R.
And
R.
smarter.
R.
Yes.
I will not edit this out.
So I think that is what kept us going.
Right.
So even if we had a rough day at work,
right,
and we would have ended the day on a rough note. I just think that our wives would make sure that there's a connection still going on.
Right.
So I think what you cannot assume that is not going to happen. This is going to happen, right? It is bound to happen.
Right.
There will be rough patches. There will be a lot of rough patches, and therefore, but if you have, well, as is in our case, the two wives being pretty friendly, right? I think that sort of always used to make sure that we are back to where we started with, right?
So, but let's say,
can I add to it?
Yeah, please.
So the way I'll hunker back on what he's also said before, right? The foundation, apart from, of course, the family helps you deflate things when they become overly inflated, right? And diffuse. But trust was the critical thing. It always begins at the top, including the rot, right? Which means that whether a company becomes successful or not, the values we espouse, how we structure it, how are our team members going to respond to the customers or difficult times, those principles are usually set when people see the leadership behave in a specific way. And that dynamic, you cannot always be conscious of it, even though you have to be, but that has to be grounded in trust. And so I remember the shouting slugfest that we would have had, right? Multiple. I mean,
in open view or like alag se?
So
both.
I'm just trying to find the right set of words. Okay, while we would think that we are in two separate rooms, everybody could hear us, right? So it was like an interesting combination. But at the same time, what everybody also knew is that the very next day, and by the way, we would have also fought in the night over the phone call also. And I mean, fighting could be for various reasons, but knowing that the next day it is going to be very normal to the extent possible was very, very important, because dissonance outside of ourselves was something that was pernicious. That is going to kill the morale of the team, which also comes about. So at least between us, we would play that role, is that, hey, I know that your tempers are strong today. You've gotten up from the wrong side of the bed. So which means that I would be that cushion who can at least help set the tone normal, and so on and so forth. And so we kind of played that complementary role. But between us, we knew that we had to talk certain things out, write long mails, or I don't know what all, have external.
And from what I'm aware, you write really long emails.
bulleted list.
Bulleted?
Lot of bullets.
That's what I'm saying. Bulleted is fine, but you can't have like 50 bullets here.
See, remember, so all the bullets that I can't shoot him with, I had to went somewhere, right?
Fair point. So my question is that, let's say you obviously guys had a dynamic where you were kind of friends, and your wives knew each other and so on and so forth, right? What advice would you give to founders or early founders or young entrepreneurs who don't have that kind of dynamic, right? So they know somebody, they see the fit, they know that they can work with this person, and how do you manage that whole co-founding kind of thing, because it takes a toll. It's not easy, right? I mean, it's difficult, right? We've heard of number of stories where people have kind of just left midway, or it hasn't worked out for whatever reason, right? So what advice would you give folks?
And at least this for me is the most critical takeaway, if at all somebody puts some value to this conversation, right? And for me, even when a lot of my friends within the circle, when they speak about or talk about joining, obviously nobody has a crystal ball, so nobody can predict what is going to happen. But the first and the foremost advice would be, if you are thinking of doing it, just do it. I mean, it sounds corny, it sounds cliched. You can analyze the hell out of every single business model. It is going to work, it is not going to work. You can convince yourself one way or the other, even with sophisticated statistical models.
Right.
but you will have to make sure that the rubber meets the road without pushing.
Right.
So yes, moonlighting can work and do all that stuff, but taking the plunge when you know that the water is going to be cold, there are no predictable stuff.
Right.
That is the biggest pivotal point. The rest of it, kind of, you learn how to survive there. But taking that plunge is the most important thing, and I see most of my friends kind of give up at that stage. And fortunately or unfortunately, it worked for me in the first time on. I was, like I said, a reluctant entrepreneur, but that was the thought. If you have a thought of doing something, you do it. Even though I'd burnt my hands, I knew the type of trust that we had even when we were trying to work on something else. So that's the first and the foremost thing. And the other couple of things that I would want to talk about is one is when it comes to the teams. I think having a human outlook, like I said, becomes a value of the organization that everybody then starts living, or at least you might want them to live with, which means handholding the teams, giving them accountability, but at the same time making sure that you are able to give them feedback, but respecting and empathizing with them. So I uttered more words than I meant to, but the whole idea is that the package is you treat somebody with utmost respect while giving them accountability. I know people talk about this thing called radical candor and all that, right? I think we were doing it without knowing the names, right? Without reading those books.
Right.
And we were doing it in tandem. We were like a tag team which was managing this in multiple ways.
Right.
So that ensures that the team morale is high.
Right.
That they know that there is going to be help. People are going to be there down in the trenches working with them, and then making sure that they deliver on whatever it is. So that's the first thing, making sure that the human values, you clearly spell those out and live those every single day. Right? That's this one. Appreciation is something that is underrated completely. Right? Smallest of wins to largest of them, etc., etc. We kind of take things for granted, especially when you are young and starting off. People come in with different backgrounds, and so even small little appreciation goes a long way.
I've seen it, by the way, I've seen it in big companies. I mean, celebrate, guys, come on. I mean, I've seen it in big companies as well. There is absolutely no celebration. Like, it's just like the wheel keeps on turning, right? I mean, but then that moment of small victory, if you celebrate, the kind of impact that it will have on people, right? It's tremendous.
100%.
Yeah,
and it's not that it came to us naturally. Right? We kind of also fell into the groove.
Right.
I remember that we were working 6 days a week, right? Which means that Saturdays, where most of the folks would be celebrating a weekend, we were still working because our customers at that point in time deemed us to be present, right? So now how do you make a celebration out of those Saturdays? I mean, it was hard, right? I know that there was a lot of resistance and blah, blah, blah. And I had to convince him after 2.5, 3 years to let us agree to 5 days and all that. But we had also pivoted by that time. So it was okay for us to have 5 days. But celebrating, which we kind of institutionalized after that, and we would do those monthly things, etc. But that keeps the morale very, very high, especially when it comes to people from the back end side of things. When people are from the technology background, where they're not very open to whole lot of conversations, where it is not about celebrating a sale, but it is also about celebrating the type of back end work you did, the type of feature that went out to the market, etc., etc. And the last thing is something that, at least to me, was, for him it came pretty naturally, working with hardcore numbers, but being right-brained.
You are right-brained.
Yeah. So exactly. So being right-brained is how it was difficult for me, but an attention to process and metrics should not be something that happens later on. So you are solving for speed. You are being very scrappy, but making sure that you have your numbers right has to be from day 0, day 1, day 2, day 3, as soon as possible. What is working, what is not working will follow on from numbers. And that is something that also sets up a discipline for everybody else, so that they are accountable not just to this thing, I got this PO, but what does that even cost us? Is it even worth the value? And this, when everybody kind of talks the same language, works very, very well for the organization.
Guys, and I think this is a concept that I personally truly believe in, that this balance of right and left brain, right? So the right brain is the creative side of it. The left brain is the more quantitative kind of element, right? So essentially having that balance in the founding team, I think that's not in the founding team, but even in the core team, for example, right? So if you are as a founder a right brainer, you should invest in finding somebody who's a left brainer, and vice versa, right? It really pays off, because I think that's the balance which kind of pushes the company forward. Otherwise, there's always going to be a lot of emphasis on just one element of it, right? Either you could end up being like too creative, right, and not looking at the business fundamentals, or just looking at the business fundamentals and not being creatively kind of inclined to solving problems, right? So yeah, some inputs from your side as well.
I think one of the questions that you asked was, how do you get the founders together?
Right.
I think I always think about it's like a marriage, right? You can love marriage is also successful, arranged marriage is also successful.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Then there's still going to be divorces.
Right.
And then there's going to be remarriages.
Which one was ours?
Both.
That's an interesting one.
You fell in love and then got married.
We courted for a long time.
With the blessings of your wife. It doesn't sound right. But that's how it was.
Yeah. So I think that I don't know that if there's ever going to be a perfect answer to that, right? You'll have to figure it out. But as an example, if I have to do it again, okay, I'll always try to go with someone who I've worked before. That's the first thing I'll do, right? But maybe as you said, you may find that as a team you still need a third person, okay, or fourth person, whatever that is, and you haven't worked with that person before. So then how do you find whether the chemistry is going to work or not?
Right.
Then what I would want to do is that I want to say, okay, can I run with them for a few days, right, before I actually make the commitment? So we have an open discussion to say, for the next 6 months, let's work together, let's see how it goes. And then if we see the wavelength matching,
right,
then we'll do it.
Got it.
And then the third part also has to be is you have to be prepared that there could be a time when things will not work out, right? And at that point of time, you also have to make sure that if the bonds are severed, okay, and people go a separate way. One, of course, you do it humanly, but at the same time, you know how to manage the business post that, right? So I just think you just have to, in your head, always be clear that there is always going to be, there can be a high possibility of eventuality.
Right.
See what you can do in order to bring down that probability, okay, by investing in some time together, by doing something together.
Right.
And in case if you have a slightly longer relationship, it's much easier, right? But honestly, I don't think there's any perfect answer. In the end, it's just going to be that chemistry between the team,
right,
okay, and and you just have to be pragmatic about handling it.
So just rounding out this discussion around co-founding and all, right? Obviously, one important point is managing conflicts, right? So obviously, like you just touched upon it some time back as well. There were conflicts, right? And I think by the way, it's really visible, the whole tag team vibe between the two of you, right? So I think it's that it's still there, right? So I think that's wonderful to see. But just managing conflicts, right? I mean, just a small note on that, right? How did you guys go about it, right? Like you mentioned, right? You gave each other space, and one person kind of took up the next day, right? So how just a little bit of insight on that, right?
I would say, to be very transparent, is that we manage conflicts, or we learned how to manage conflicts as children. Okay, starting, you always think that you know how to do it, okay, but your parents tell you that be good kids, right? But you still haven't learned the software aspect of how to really manage it when things really blow. And then over time you start sort of getting used to understanding of how the other one reacts, how the things pan out post that. So I think it's going to be a learning phase, like even the way it happens with a child. Okay, when two children play, okay, eventually they figure out a way to continue playing and not pulling their head out, right? So I think that is always going to be that journey. But the only thing that you can do to minimize the impact of that, initial back and forth, okay, is ideally if one of them has the ability to take a step back, right? Ideally, both of them should be able to do, or all the people should be able to do. But at least someone has to have that ability to do that.
Right.
If as any team members, it's not about co-founders, even as husband, wife, or just colleagues, if both of them are supercharged, okay, and remain to be supercharged at every point of time, then I think that conflict will just will just go to the next level, which you'll never know to control it.
Yeah.
So I think in our case, what I think worked well was, of course there would be some times when it would get a bit complicated, but overall, at least Rajeev would be someone who would be able to manage the conflict a bit better among the team members. But yeah, there's also a very important part of conflict management which is underlying all of this is trust, right? If that fundamental piece of trust is not there, right, you will never be able to get back the next day morning or when the diffusion has happened to say this is why I have a problem. One concept that I've learned part of over my journey in the last couple of years specifically, okay, is this whole concept of the ability to clear the air. So can you meet the next day, okay, or have a systematic process to say, before I'm going to start my next catch up, I'm going to have a 5-minute session on clear the air. And at that point of time, no one is going to speak, but you speak your mind out, okay, to say, this was my emotion, and this is what I didn't like. I may want to have a discussion on it, I may not want to have a discussion on it. But I've just made my point and I move forward. So that ability, that trust within the team to have that 5-minute session, okay, actually comes very handy, because in the end you're giving everyone a platform, okay, to say that let's clear the air. So I think that is very important. And the second part that I think, which I did not do initially at all, okay, and again the last couple of years that I think I've evolved a bit more, is fact that you have to acknowledge emotions, right? So whether you think you are emotional, I always think I'm not a very emotional person, but in the end I have emotions. I may not be emotive,
might not be showing them,
okay, but I have emotions, right? Now if I have the emotions, why can't I acknowledge my emotions and just speak about, I'm just feeling shitty about this, right? You may not have intended to make me feel like that way, but I felt like this, and I may not even want to discuss this, but I'm just telling you this, right? Putting it out there. So I think a lot of founders, and typically most of the founders would be type A founders, right? They would be headstrong. They would sort of think they are God's gift to mankind, etc. Right? And we never want to go out and acknowledge that we have
flaws,
or we have emotions. Right? That how can I feel bad about it? I mean, why will I feel mushy about it? But you do feel. You do. So I just think the ability to acknowledge that emotion is very important. That's fundamental. If you're able to realize that, you will be able to realize that it's okay for me to acknowledge it, and you will also be able to understand that the person in front of you also has an emotion. And the only way you can solve a conflict is if you're able to deal with that emotion. Okay, else the conflict is going to get, whether you call it ego, whether it's going to be emotional, the conflict never get resolved. It just be.
It's just there. It's just there. It's always kind of hanging.
So therefore, if there's a fundamental sense of trust, okay, you can create within the team. Second is, for your own self, acknowledge your emotion. Okay, and second, is there a way that you can create a forum, okay, where people can express this? Then over a period of time, I just think you'll be able to better manage your conflict without getting into frameworks.
Excellent, very good. Guys, I think this is the best part about these videos. You get to hear it from people who've actually done it. So thanks for
even everything was grounded in trust.
Right.
And remember that these things flare up much more when there is a crisis at hand. Which means, let's say, and I remember those days when we know that there is small runway left. There is a lot of challenges, whether it is a fundraising event which is happening or customers are. I mean, multiple screw-ups have happened and
Right.
leading us to this place.
Right.
And that's when everybody's tempers are up, their guards are up, and
Right.
everything is going wrong, or everything could potentially go wrong, starts
Right.
finding its way to go wrong.
Right.
And that is when conflict, yes, but the moment you start questioning intents, it's a spiral
Right.
down to
It's a
death.
downward spiral.
There is nothing that can come out of it, and hence during that time, hey, this is all in.
Right.
This is who we are,
Right.
and I cannot like 20 things about somebody, but it's not coming in from a position of bad intent. That has to be the grounding foundation for everything else. And the reason why I say that is that it's easy for your friends for granted, like you said. But it turns out to be that friendship changes completely when you're working together.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was my point, right?
And it changes. I mean, like you said, we had to figure out how to avoid the unavoidable. Right? We were in our faces so much, even during the late nights and random hours and all that. But we had to figure out how that would operate.
Right.
So many of these things work. And to me, some wise guy also mentioned about my emails, etc., etc. And by the way, we were also open to taking third-party interventions and opinions, etc.
Right.
And guys, this is where this is a shameless plug from Utkarsh, which says that it was Unotumbler that also helped us out a little bit during the times that we were kind of in some of the rough patches.
Yeah.
But he had coming in more from a friend who's like a third-party objective to different people, right? But where it kind of helped us was to make sure that we are able to articulate things in a proper way. And the reason as to why I wrote any kind of email was also because of the fact that then I'm being more deliberate about what I want to write instead of my tone doing half of my work. So I'm high-pitched, tense, with bad enunciation coming out of it. And so what somebody is reading out of it is completely different from what I mean. And when I'm writing it, I'm more deliberate, I'm more conscious, a little bit more succinct. I can be better at that. But at least I'm managing my emotions in a more deliberate fashion. And hence that's at least one of the frameworks that I used to follow, and hence I still do. But it kind of helped us. But like I said, bedrock was trust.
I'm not sure whether you looked at the space when you were talking about your emails. I looked at it. Maybe you should look at it in the feedback.
What I don't know is, I don't know whether he read them or not. He did.
I always opened the mails.
And he always replied in one liner.
Let's talk about it.
Got it.
Got it. Alright, great. Cool, thanks. I think this is a great primer on the entire kind of co-founding and working together and the conflict part of it. Now let's just skip a little bit, right? And I want to talk about your journey, right? So the journey of Numberz, so to speak. You guys started in 2014?
No,
15.
15 end.
15 end, right? And then you ended up raising money. When did that happen?
15 end.
So 15 end, you raised your seed, right? Which was from K Capital.
K Capital and Coastline Impact.
And Coastline Impact, right? And then you ended up raising a round from Sequoia, right? And that happened in 2017, right? So 15, then 15 and seed, and then 17 a Series A, and then eventually you guys got acquired.
So after that we had another round from Sequoia.
And
few other funds. This happened 15 days before COVID hit.
Wow. Oh, okay. Hold on to that thought. We'll come to that. And then 2021, you guys got acquired?
So right? 9/11/2021.
9/11/2021. Okay. Wow. Okay. All right. So 2015 to 2021. So it's been a 6-year journey, and obviously the journey continues now as part of Chargebee, right? But that's been the journey. So I just want you guys to kind of just walk us through what the journey was like. Obviously you had a starting point, you had some thoughts, right? And I think you mentioned also in one of the answers there was a bit of a pivot as well, right? So walk us through that, right? I think it will be very interesting to kind of hear for all our viewers, right, what your journey has been like. So
I think the journey when it started off, right? I think the pedigree of the founding team helped us raise money, almost on D-1. So our investors really believed in what we had come up with as an idea, and then supported us. And so I think we closed the round somewhere around about in November 2015. Okay, the team just got together around the same time, and we launched the product in Jan 2016.
Okay.
Right, and till about 2018, we ran with this whole product, the cash flow management product for small businesses.
Right. So I think your initial starting point was small businesses.
Yeah, small businesses. And initially we started off by building the software, and then the idea was that we could plug in financial services eventually.
Right.
Okay, and so we launched the software, the first version of the software in Jan 2016, and that sort of just took off for us.
Okay.
Because we had come from the Intuit background, so we sold to SMBs a lot. A lot of the Intuit team members had joined, us. So from 2016 to 2018, I think we really had a sort of pretty explosive growth. We almost acquired 20,000 small businesses in that point of time. And we also were able to partner with banks like Yes Bank and IDFC. Yeah. And we were starting to get their products on our platform. Okay. At that point of time, the banking APIs in 2017-ish had just started coming off.
Got it.
Okay.
So essentially, these banks were able to sell to your customers using your platform.
Yeah. So we would integrate their products into our platform.
Into our
right.
platform.
So for example, if you're sending an invoice, a payment gateway could go with it.
Got it.
Right.
Got
So this would be a bank's payment gateway.
Got it.
Okay.
Got it.
Eventually, the idea was that using that data, the bank could actually give a credit to the customer as well.
Right.
So that is what we had started doing.
It was like a fledgling neo-banking concept,
Got it.
which is what we were at that point.
And so we got selected by Yes Bank as part of their, in 2017 start, we got selected by Yes Bank as part of their sort of incubation team that was trying to create this kind of this new bank concept. That's when Sequoia funded us. They're very excited with idea what we were doing. And so this continued for some time, okay. But what we realized was by end of 2017, okay, and it's funny, it was like just 6 months post Sequoia money came in, we started realizing that while we were doing all of this, we would have, it was a business selling stuff to SMBs, even if we were selling them financial services. It was very, very difficult to make money out of them. Extremely, excruciatingly difficult. Okay, so we would get scale, okay, but we would just struggle to make money out of them overall. And the only way we would have made money is by launching more products, giving more services, but that would also come at a cost.
So they weren't like they weren't ready to pay for many of the services.
Yeah.
That they eventually would end up making money.
Yeah.
Right.
So to put it into perspective, think about it. Our ACV, our annual contract value of the Numberz platform at that point in time to an SMB was somewhere between 3,500 to 6,500 odd. Maximum would be 7,000. This is to SMBs. Rupees, right? And this was I wish. And this was the time when QuickBooks was retailing at 500 to 1,500 rupees. Remember, it's an entire accounting platform. So we had crossed that chasm.
Right.
But our CAC was somewhere around 22,000 rupees.
Oh wow. Okay.
So, and while we were launching and relaunching newer products, we were doing Automagic reconciliation, etc., etc. The problems were not complex enough for the small businesses to start giving us see value in the problem and then give us money.
It would have been good to have, but not like something which they would kind of see value in.
Yeah, I think. So I'll get to that. Okay.
Sure.
But we were at a fundamental level, we were convinced of the concept. Okay, we knew that the pain point was right. We knew we were solving it well. What I think we were not sure about at that point of time is, one, by continuing to build on this concept, right? We are completely relying on external capital for growth. In 2017, if you ask most of the VCs, okay, and say that would you invest in an SMB business, there were very, very few. Okay, I mean you could actually pretty much count on your fingers. So we also knew that for us to go out and make a real business, okay, it has to generate some revenue, okay, some substantial revenue for us to grow. and we cannot completely depend on external capital
All the time.
Okay, all the time, because it wasn't the heydays of the SMB investment in India. And at that point of time, the whole neobank, even in Europe, okay, was just getting started, right? And it was still in the earlier days. So there was still this whole thing that, by the way, one of the biggest challenges we had at that point of time is, what do we call ourselves? Do we call ourselves a neobank? Do we call ourselves a SaaS company? Do we call ourselves a lending company? What do we really call ourselves?
Right.
Okay, so this is also a time where we were like, we've solved a pain point. There is an acceptance of the product, but we are not too sure whether the unit economics is making sense or not. The market is not that where we can continue to just raise tens of hundreds of millions of dollars. It wasn't like that in 2017. So we were still in that thought process. Okay, where what started happening, we started getting large corporates come to us and tell us that we've seen your software, and we have a collections issue, an accounts receivables collections issue. Would you be interested in selling your software to us?
Okay.
And we were like, are you freaking kidding me? We are not like a software implementation company. We are like a software product company.
This is cool, man.
Yeah, okay.
Cool. We don't do dhanda. We raise money. We raise money.
We are from the Intuit school of thought, where it's like a product.
Yeah, it's a
right?
product.
And product cannot be customized to a segment. So we kept saying no to that. And then eventually, what it started seeing, we saw two other companies come to us. That same. I mean, similar concept.
Banks were pushing us to their customers.
And so these were companies which were on SAP. 5,000, 6,000 crores in revenue. They had Salesforce. And in our head, we were just not clear, why would they have a problem, right? And why would they need a solution?
Right.
So then we started going back. So after we got the second or third time, we got that interest. And by the way, one of the things was that bank came to us. One of the partner banks came to us and said, hey, this is what we want. This is a specific thing that we want for our customers. It seemed that you already have 90% of it. Would you want to develop it for us? And then we saw that and we were like, yeah, this is just accounts receivables. So we are doing, as a cash flow piece, you're doing accounts receivables and accounts payable. And this is like a perfect description of what an accounts receivable solution look like. And we are doing quite a bit, but why would they want it? Why would a bank want to sell to large corporates? So then we went back to the drawing board. In fact, we spent a lot of time going and seeing all softwares in the world that used to have thing called accounts receivables. And then we identified this company called High Radius at that point of time in the US. It wasn't a unicorn at that point of time, but it was an 18-year-old company that was like an SAP partner initially to start with, and they were like really kicking ass. And we were like, oh, this seems to be a real problem. And they were only selling to corporates. And then we started seeing a few more companies in a similar thing. And then we realized maybe this is the problem for which we can actually get paid. And as Rajeev said, our ACV at that point of time was, in the best case scenario, let's say even I assume 10,000 rupees a year. A year.
Selling to SMBs is not easy, right?
And then this corporate was ready to pay us anywhere between 10 lakhs to 15 lakhs.
My God.
That's like 100x ACV. And the other thing was that, and that sort of idea, we realized that this is just not an India problem, this is a global problem. And our solution solves a lot of it. And we said,
let's
pivot. Let's pivot.
And this happened like, I think 2 years into your journey,
2018.
2018. 3 years.
So 2018 Jan is when we started thinking about this, and June 2018 we took a tough call. And we overnight stopped our CFM.
So I think one thing that I would really want you guys to talk about is, how did you go about that pivot, right? Did you just like call the SMBs and said we're not doing it anymore? We think let it kind of just peter out on its own.
So I think, I mean, one learning as a founder, is that you have to take tough calls. Right, there's no escape to that. Right, and the earlier you take the tough calls, the better it is. Right. So in June, by that time we had just proven that we could sell our solution to enough people. There is a market for this, and people were paying for it. We had at least we had signed up 10 plus customers already for this product, which was not even actually ready. Okay. It was pretty much just beautiful screens that we were selling. And people were signing up for it. So we know that, okay, this is a real product. People are interested. And we just took a call to say, we have a small tech team. We can't get them to move in two different directions, right? So let's just take a tough call. I think by end June 2018, we stopped selling anything to the SMEs.
Got it.
But what we continue with, like all those people who've paid us, we will honor them. We'll honor them for next 1 year or 2 years. We did that, but we overnight shut. So maybe in hindsight, we should have taken the call there itself and even
just
completely stopped it. But at least we completely stopped. The development on it, sales on it. But till here was the easiest part. This I don't think was this was a very logical, a very thought through, and in some sense, I would say that people that if when it's on paper, it made complete sense. What we did not realize that when you change from selling to an SMB, selling to an enterprise, you're fundamentally changing the soul of the company.
Absolutely, totally. Yeah.
So when you change the soul of the company, the easiest part actually is to create the product. The toughest part is to completely give up the last 2 years of
the learning that
you had, the team composition, the team skill set, the team mindset. You completely giving that up, and you have to now take a completely different mindset. Right? We supremely underestimated. This mindset shift.
So you guys said, "Yeah, A team hai, ye kar rahi hai. Now let's just now you're selling to these guys." So this
and that team earlier was. I think at our peak we were roughly 65 people strong, which means that the sales was over phone. So there was an inside sales team which would qualify. There was marketing campaigns, etc. A typical SaaS sale which would conclude with a 15-day sales cycle. Even for slightly larger businesses, it would still take less than a month. We would know whether it is lost or not. With enterprises, now it is no more over sale. And it is not just enterprises, we are talking about large companies. And the ICP for us, or the TG, the persona that we are targeting is also from the finance background. Which means we are talking about finance controllers, CFOs, the decision makers, And these are the guys who are doyens of an industry, would typically have, let's say, 35 plus, 35 to 50 odd roughly age, depending upon the company that you go to, would belong to different set of industries. They would also have a specific way of understanding how to interact with vendors. Which would mean that now instead of your skills on phone, you are going there, presenting yourself. The way a bank would go and work with them, you are also going in as a financial company. You would talk to them one-on-one. The typical sales cycle of a complex sale, we speak about bank and budget authority and all that stuff, which did not need that much of rigor during the times of telesales, was suddenly now very real.
So you went from probably like closing it in like a month to probably say 3 months or 4 months of discussions and all.
If you were lucky.
Even higher.
Wow. Even higher than that. But then it was also about mapping multiple stakeholders, going there in person, initial presence, etc. And the larger guys also needed you needed your credentials. You needed a little bit of background experience, etc., for them to be talking to us. While we were kind of getting our feet, it had to change substantially for the teams who had built a different type of muscles to now this newer team that either would transition or we would have to hire somebody again with a very different set of muscle sets.
So then you revamped the entire team?
So the marketing had to change. The sales had to change. We learned the concept of implementation, which we never thought was a complicated process.
It would have been this is the software.
The way that you think about the product also changes. When you think from when you're selling to SMBs, you think about number of customers. When you think about an enterprise, you're thinking about number of invoices in a single customer. So the entire architecture has to change. So
customer success did not exist.
Implementation
exists for us.
That
it did not exist. I mean, it was still evolving.
So I think we literally didn't realize it, but over the next 1 year, we had to completely change the DNA of the company.
Right.
I don't think the value would have changed, but I think the DNA of the company changed.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
who we were. We had to let go of a lot of people. We had to get in new people.
Right.
The composition, the skill sets.
Right.
We had to transform ourselves. Most
Right.
importantly, I think
Right.
we underestimate that. The founder market fit is far more important sometimes than the product market fit.
Right.
At least I, as a founder, I had always an SMB background. I'd never thought about enterprise ever in my life.
Right.
And now suddenly I was selling to
Suddenly you're-
enterprise.
Right.
Okay. So it was a complete 360 shift.
Ah.
So I think the next 1 year was a year of dramatic transformation. Okay. But I think we were lucky. We believed that again the product was making sense. The overall thesis that we wanted to integrate financial services on it was still working. Okay. So the banks were also
So it
partnering with us.
remained in that entire field of vision that you guys started off with. Right?
So that was still working. I think by September 2019, the last quarter, October, November, December, Q4 2019, we started seeing a lot of traction. Okay, so we actually acquired Fortune 500 companies also. Okay, during that time, and I think we were projecting Q1 2020 to be sort of a pretty good quarter.
The year.
And
then we know what happened in 2020.
So I think that entire journey, okay, from 2018 to end 2019,
right.
was, if according to me, the trial by fire.
Right.
And of all the things that happened throughout the journey, okay, this was something that I had never anticipated. I mean, code, of course, we never anticipated,
Right,
but I'm saying this is something that I think a lot of people go through, okay, but we don't realize it.
Right.
That we all talk about pivots. It's so easy to, the company pivoted. The company, has pivoted 3 times,
Right.
or XYZ. But what we don't realize is every pivot is
changing the soul of your-
excruciating.
yeah,
Is
yeah,
really excruciating, right? It's
Right.
not easy.
Right.
That I think was one of the biggest lessons I learned. That change management at this scale also, okay,
Right.
is very, very difficult, and that would have actually killed us.
Right.
Literally, they would have wiped us. I mean, it also causes doubts in the investor's mind.
Of course.
Okay, it causes doubts in the founder's mind to say,
Right.
have I just given up a golden goose?
Ah.
Okay, and now am I going after something that's going to be crappy?
Right.
The team is like, are they freaking on drugs?
Right.
Okay, what's going on?
What's going on? Then suddenly.
Shiny object syndrome.
Yeah.
Till a few months back, you were like, dude, I really understand this industry very well.
Right.
And now you're like, I'm really trying to understand the industry. I have no freaking idea what's going on. But I'm trying to
even during
understand.
this transition, right, I think one of the things that did, I don't say ideally worked for us, it was never a better process to be.
Right.
But the teams rallied. I think we've been fortunate enough, we are able to sleep at night because we never, at least in our heads, we were not doing wrong by anybody, which meant that if the teams had to, let's say variables, in most of the cases, I think we've had multiple fights around it, what to do with it, etc. But we have always honored, in most of the cases, commitment, whether it was during that time or later on. Even during this time, especially for pivots, even the way certain changes are announced to the team, how frankly are you able to talk to them about it, but more importantly, what do you do after this change? When now everybody is conscious about, hey, now what is going to happen after this point in time? I think that transition to even give everybody a chance to come up to the level of, let's say, from a SMB sale to an enterprise sale, we did give, in at least to the extent possible, to the capability that we had at that point in time, with the runway that we had, did give people enough to transition. If they were not, then they knew that, okay, no, this cannot move forward. So it was like a good move for them, knowing that in the way companies headed, my skill sets might not match. And there is the same work for us. Even when we were having that conversation, the toughest conversations that we could ever have had was, we take the blame for it because we are changing the direction of the survival of the company, etc. And it has got nothing to do with whether somebody is able to perform or not.
Right.
But here is a chance to see if you think that this change direction gels well with
Aligns with you. Yeah, so fair point. So I think just quickly rounding this up on the journey, right? And while quickly, what has been the toughest part, right, that you guys kind of went through, right, throughout this entire journey? Was it this element around GTM, or which you just spoke about, or did you have the challenges around fundraising? What, as per you, was the toughest kind of part of this entire journey? Don't say everything was tough. वो हमें पता है.
No. I actually, but unfortunately, that's my only answer. Okay, because I think during the phase of your journey, right? Each phase, each of these elements becomes a challenge, right? But I think something that's very consistent, that's the hardest thing of running a company is people. Okay, and it's not about you can't get good people. It's not about that people leave. In fact, I don't think we saw a lot of attrition. Okay, I mean, we had to take tough calls because when we pivoted. Right. But I don't remember at any point of time we sat down and said, oh my God, we have such high attrition rates, right? But I think what's important is how you as founders get the best out of your people, right? Because I think one is not everyone is good at everything, right? And as the company grows, those roles, can become like something that they can't do, right? Sometimes their expectation is different from the way the industry is reacting, and how do you set that up? And none of this thing has a challenge in terms of the intent issue. It's just that everyone comes from a different point of view. Okay, and then how do you get all of them to get excited about and then go through this entire crazy journey? As an example, let's say we are in April. There will be a lot of companies would have given an appraisal. Okay, now if in an appraisal, you have X amount of resources, you can only give so much to so many people. But out of 5 people that you have, 2 people have not got what they had expected. But though you may think that you've gone right. How do you still get those 5 people to be excited the next day morning? Okay, how do you get them to think that the company may not even exist next year, but I'm still have to give my 100% tomorrow? Right. That, as founders, I think is the most difficult thing that happens to you throughout that journey. And it's not that when you're small, it's not that when you are like funded, it's not that when you are your 10 first customers. Freaking, it's like throughout. And the more people you have, the more bigger challenge this is. Absolutely. Right? Yeah. So I think this is a perennial, or this is an ongoing challenge that all founders have to just be aligned that this is going to happen. And the faster you're able to train yourself I would say the different way. You have to constantly train yourself for the next level. The challenge that you're solving right now is going to be very different from you're going to solve for 2 years for the same people challenge. Right. So I think that is the consistent area that founders have to constantly reinvent and learn and give up, relearn, give up, relearn.
It's such a balance, right? You need to be authentic as well. You need to sell a vision as well. You need to look at the hard facts as well. You need to kind of figure out how much money is there in the bank as well, right? Yeah. So I think you need to kind
balance
of
and this is where I think the original question was that can you do it alone? To me, all of this speaks to that, right? Which essentially would mean that, and I completely agree, it is the people and morale of your own, of the team who would ultimately deliver, and ultimately it's a story that you're selling to everybody else. Right? It's a vision. And when the vision changes, how do those people are also able to align themselves? And that morale, if there are multiple heads which are working on it, it definitely helps. Which definitely would mean that you have somebody from the quote unquote leadership team, even though I personally hate the boss and the leadership concept, etc. But still, somebody who is at the helm of things, you are not just being heard, but there is some action which is also happening, and it might not happen equally from everybody else, right? Which means but you still should be able to talk, vent, get feedback, provide them with certain actionable timelines. Might not be ideal, but at least there is something that is happening on a constant basis.
And
so it's not just.
How did you guys keep the morale high, right? I mean, that's a very good point that you guys brought up, right? So, see, I mean, typically, मैंने देखा है कि it's like party दे देते हैं यार. It's obviously you do that, but there are a lot of other things also that you kind of need to look at, right? So, what are the things that you guys did?
See, I think if you ask me, and one of the benchmarks was, you spoke about attrition, right? I don't know. So I was also the external storyteller, right? Internally, he would do all that stuff, but. So I had also posted this, and we did not even know that something like a Glassdoor existed before. And it turned out to be that people were posting about our names, etc., etc. There is actually a post which actually says how year on year our Glassdoor scores have actually increased.
Wow.
And these are the people who were giving external feedback, and we kind of grew over it. The journey was from never needing somebody who will quote unquote look at HR, or to somebody who actually needs something, etc. But that was more like admin stuff, right? But to me, if you ask me personally, making sure that we are able to talk to people on a one-on-one basis, so even when the lights are out, we are home, partying, yes, it is important, because you do let your hair down and then you have multiple conversations which you would not have within the confines of the four walls, right? But I'm not saying party for the heck of it, but you would generally celebrate certain milestones. We did go overboard at some point in time, but in most of the cases we were pretty sane. But that's one aspect of it. But we would then also celebrate festivals, small little things, but mostly wins. Calling out people,
most important guys. I think
the leadership team syncs that we've been having. So working with the small cohort of leaders and letting them talk to us about a whole lot of things, having separate one-on-ones with them, figuring out what is working, what is not working, because we might have in our own wisdom, we would have had a town hall where we have spoken about a whole lot of things, but how much of it did actually percolate down? How do you get a pulse of it? Right? And getting to know of it and then trying to address it in whatever little ways which are possible. I'm not saying that everybody is going to be happy, but to the extent possible that you can get a gauge of it, and as you grow, kind of institutionalize it. Monthly stuff that we would do, and it kind of blossomed during the COVID days, where we would even celebrate Diwali even though we were virtual, right? And for us it was again a change. We were adopting, and then still trying to figure out what to do with the teams which are growing and which are continuing to work and slogging every single day. So it was a mixed bag of a whole lot of things, but also externally appreciating people, externally talking our story, talking about who we are as a team, but putting it out there so that everybody kind of acknowledges that.
I do want to just add one part to what Rajeev said. One of the reasons why I think we were able to also handle the morale of the team was, I think we were extremely lucky throughout our journey that some of our second level team members were, were people who had great relationships with their teams. Right? Whether it was in sales, whether it was in engineering, whether it was in marketing. I think what we did right, was that within us and the immediate next level, we had a very candid relationship. So they would knew what shit was going on, right? And therefore, what
honest and
so they would know that either we are in deep shit or where we are, right? So they always knew the truth, and then they were able to percolate that sentiment to their team, where I think the only consistent message that was there, was that whatever we are doing, we are being transparent, and that we are doing the right intent. We're not screwing you over, and therefore what we can't control is the external factors. So let us move forward. So I really think we were like, as I say, super lucky to have that great second level, who took that, who believed in us, because, and then they had the ability to build that relationship with their teams. I think that was one of the best ways to percolate and keep that enthusiasm going, even if there was external shit happening.
Even when we had external people, right?
Right.
Now are the days of DEIB, but even before that, I think we did certain things intuitively, right?
Right.
Which was, even if there were external contractors that we had, we never differentiated them, including the insurance policies and so on and so forth, which have to be,
Right.
I mean, you have to be cognizant about it,
Right.
but everything was designed around making sure that the team doesn't see itself to be separate and everybody is pushing in the same direction. And it definitely, the L management, there is no question about it. They helped get the other things done.
Right.
And so everybody knew how to treat the other person.
Right.
And at least to the extent possible, given the pressures and everybody is under the pump. But I guess we were doing certain things intuitively correct. We wanted to create a human organization. That was something that we had always thought we would. And I think even when we look at the external feedback that has been given on such platforms, one thing that we always scored high on was culture.
Right.
And it was not that we were going out saying, hey, this is what defines our culture. We wanted to, but we never were able to come around to it.
Right.
But it was already there as part of what we were living.
Right.
So it was more like a lived culture than something which was written down.
Yeah. Guys, I'll throw in their LinkedIn IDs in the description, right? Please reach out to them and ask them what they did, right? So I think please feel free. I think these are great learnings, and obviously some things are very intuitive in nature, right? You've not penned them down, but I think by virtue of kind of having lived the journey, I'm sure there are a lot of learnings that you can kind of help people with. Okay, great. So I think quick one on the fundraising bit, right? So I think that must have been quite a journey.
Actually, I just think to be transparent, it wasn't I mean, in February 2020, I had no idea that's going to be a real life. Right. So I wasn't thinking like that. My only advice on any of the fundraising journeys is always going to be that you never stop raising. Okay, or the way you never stop selling, you never stop interviewing, you never stop raising. If you are clear in your head that you have to have a round for you to go to the next level, you just never stop raising, which means that even if I did not need the money, I would keep meeting my investors, okay, potential investors, and it just so happened that in January our board felt that we needed more money to scale up, right? This was the right time, and this is believed in us. This is backed us. They backed the moment they backed us. Other investors and came on board, and they just closed around. And I mean, and since our existing investors invested, even though all the money did not come before the lockdown happened, I think the last money came until June. So the fundraise continued from February, maybe let's take it up February 20th, okay, to right up to June 20th, right? It continued, right? Because some people did take a step back to say, oh wow, what has happened, but they still everyone committed, and we came through. So my only thing over here is that it was nothing special. It was just that as a process, founders who know that they need money should constantly be engaging existing investors. Of course, they'll be on the board, or they should constantly be talking to potential investors whom they are interested in.
Got it. Fabulous, great, super. Now coming to the defining sort of moment for a lot of aspiring entrepreneurs, your exit, right? So I think it's everybody does not get an exit, right? And you guys have had a successful, favorable exit, right? So walk us through that journey, right? And obviously, when the first kind of inbound interest would have come through, you obviously would have spoken, both of you, right? So what was the thought, right? Did you guys kind of feel it's too early for us? How did you go about it? Was it organic?
Yeah, so I think if you think about the emotions that we've gone through from the first time someone told us to the time it happened, I think we would have gone through emotion which was, are we selling a soul? Okay, it's gone to a stage where, oh, this is the best milestone we can have. Okay, to eventually really getting to a stage in our life where we said, oh, this is just another pit stop. Right. So I can tell you we've gone through all phases.
Right.
So at a certain point, I think there was a denial that are you mad? We didn't start to sell out.
Right.
To in the end a pragmatic point that the best way for us to grow global is eventually to get acquired.
Right.
The fastest way to grow global is to get acquired.
Right.
And so.
And that too, like with Chargebee, what a great partner.
Yeah, and the other thing I can say that if you think about acquisition, right, you should always think that you as a company, right, don't get sold, you get bought. Okay, which means that the person who's acquiring you has to be really interested in acquiring you. They have to really find value. Even if there is a pay you at $1, right? They need to find a way. They need to be convinced that they will get a lot of value out of you. Okay.
Right.
So you always have to be clear about that one mindset that you are going to get bought.
Right.
Okay. You can't sell your company.
Right.
Which means that you have to think about that relationship. Okay. For some time.
Right.
Okay. Of course, there will always be exceptions that someone comes and says, "I'm going to buy you out tomorrow."
Right.
I mean, but that's great for a Hollywood movie. Okay. But in most cases, what's going to happen is the person who's acquiring you has a very strategic vision, and where this acquisition is going to fill in that strategic vision.
Right. And it will take time.
And it takes time. Okay. Chargebee was a partner, so we were working with Chargebee for almost 9 months before that.
Right.
Okay, one of our biggest customers was their biggest customers, and we had done a trick, where they saw a huge opportunity that they could not have done. We had done it.
Right. Okay.
And of course, the other thing that I will say is that whenever you think about M&A, an M&A only works, okay, when there are two buyers. Okay, M&A never works. Two or more. It never works if you just have one buyer. I mean, I will not say it never works, but the best way to make it work is to have two buyers. So you always figure out a way to get two buyers. That's
excellent, point. I think that's a great takeaway. I think also.
I'll just add one thing before you. See, in Chargebee, or like you said, two or more, right? So we had plural suitors, so to say. But so the internal discussion was also which is the best home for the product.
Right.
So which means that the most suboptimal way to say I'm not selling my soul is to say that will the vision be carried forward in some shape or form, or will it gel well with the larger whole.
Right.
And in many of the cases, it turned out to be that the ultimate decision that we finally closed in on was not just the best home for the product, the way it is being visioned and hence the value, the people, and across the board, whenever that we saw the values or the ethos that we had, the way we were talking about our people, it is not very different from the way we saw that happening around. So it was not just a transaction per se. It was all about will we be able to sleep better knowing that all the stakeholders who had reposed their trust in us, would we have done justice to all of them?
Right.
And in this case, I think we had.
But and I think also one of the important elements through that entire journey, and I think you've touched upon it from a people point of view, that there is an imminent conversation that is going on, which kind of might culminate into a sale, right, from an exit point of view. How do you kind of manage the daily ongoing activities, right? I mean, isn't it like two different elements? एक जगह हम बात कर रहे हैं कि यार we will exit. दूसरी जगह we'll have to make sure that the team continues to kind of team क्या मतलब you guys also kind of continue to operate and do, because that might not fructify, right? So how was that phase? And I think like you mentioned, it took time, right? Must have been difficult, right?
Well, I'll talk in two different ways to think about it. Two different challenges that happens in what you just mentioned. One challenge is that what you said, that your operation has to continue. In fact, if you do not continue to grow, the acquisition may not happen.
Actually.
Okay. Yeah. So this not growing is non-negotiable. Right? This has to grow. Because either this will not happen, or if it doesn't happen, this will not again happen. So this is non-negotiable. I think the second bigger, and how will you make it grow? You make it happen. When when your existence is at stake, right? People just come together and you figure it out, right? And it works. So don't ask me how it works, but it works, right? Right. And of course you have Chinese walls. You have tried to have a bit of Chinese walls because you don't tell everyone in the company that this is happening, so that they don't get asked 200 questions what's going on.
Right.
But at the same time, you have a bit transparency with a few core people to tell them, dude, I'm not available.
Right.
Okay, don't even come to me if hell is breaking loose.
And legally you can't tell anybody anyways.
So therefore you can't do that anyway. Right. So that will happen. That you'll figure out a way to do it. I think what also is going to happen is that when the conversation happens at various stages, you'll be at a place where the conversation is going to just blow off. Okay, that you want to come back out of that call to say, dude,
we're working out.
This is not happening. Either I'm working or they're going to work out. Okay.
It was the negotiation.
Okay, and it becomes very, very crazy because in the end, I can tell you, finalizing how much you're going to get paid is the easiest part. It's all the other shit that you have to take care of. Okay, is far more challenging, and you have to then. We were honestly, again, I think super lucky to have people like Chargebee with us, right? Who at a core share the same kind of values in terms of people values. So what we never had to negotiate with them, okay, was what's going to happen to our people, and how will they be treated, and how will they be rewarded. We just didn't have to discuss that. Okay, like in one shot. It was agreed upon, out. Okay, I think the only challenge, the only challenge we had was more from legal perspective. Okay, legal and compliance perspective. Right. So I think it was again a stroke of luck. Okay, where we got people who had the same values, so it was easier for us to take a decision also to say this is the right home. Okay, for us to grow. Of course, the visions were also important, but I think at a core, as Rajeev said. We felt this is the right place to be, and it just proved out in negotiation time itself, like that I didn't have to discuss all of that. Right. And so therefore, this challenge of going through this whole process, okay, is also mentally extremely challenging because there are not too many people involved. Okay.
So you can't talk to everyone.
Yeah. So you can't talk. You have to take decisions on the spot, literally, or maybe you give you 1 or 2 hours. And the decision you're going to take is going to impact all stakeholders.
Everything.
All stakeholders, right? So the amount of pressure you get into, is that. And this is a time when you are morally tested the most. Okay? Because not morally, not in the sense that any shit is going to happen. But morally what happens is you have so many stakeholders in the company. Right. Your investors also have a different, type of investors you have. You have, your people, you have your customers, you have, so many other people around it. And any decision you take, okay, is going to impact someone somewhere. Right. So how do you take a decision which at least is morally your right? Okay. I don't think I was ever able to take a decision to say everyone is going to be happy. I don't think I ever wanted to make everyone happy. It's impossible to make everyone happy. Okay. But can you go take a call that you think morally okay, you've taken the right decision. Right. So I think that is these things are much more challenging than, let's say, trying to run the company on the side. Okay, that will run because your number 2 hours are pretty good. Right. If 3 months you're not there, they'll still make it work. So I think these challenges
and this morality, and it is an interesting thing, right? Because even when we speak about it, what makes you, again, my benchmark is, even though I sleep less, but what makes you sleep better at night is when you know that you have done the utmost to everybody, even though it was an investor who entered at the very last moment, or an employee who had exited with ESOPs and then 3 years back. 3 years back, right? And we did not have to, but we still did, because they were during our foundational times had helped us get there. And we stayed. So even though it might be a chump change, but it was still a gesture from us reaching out to everybody saying, hey, this is what you were a part of Numberz, you made it happen. And I think the memento that we gave June, July period was also, you made Numberz happen or something like that, which was our way to say that, hey, you mattered and you took us to where we were.
Right.
The morality also was our responsibility towards when the due diligence is happening, right? And we are seeing this blow up everywhere else, that you are not perfect. Your documentation is screwed up. There are a whole lot of things because you've been scrappy throughout your existence. We were never preparing ourselves for acquisition, right? And when a due diligence is happening, especially when it is a cross-border due diligence, you are also dealing with multiple entities, and you are here a set of 2 or 3 people, right? And you're managing everything. So it's easy for you to paper over certain things and represent things which you think might not happen, might not even have a longer term problem. But this is where moral hazard can easily come into play, right? But I think apart from genuine mistakes that I would have made, even during that time, we knew that Chargebee is reposing big trust in us. And hence, whether it is the legal teams or Indian legal teams or US legal teams, etc., multiple team members, I think we did well, or at least we did reasonably well.
Well, I can tell you one thing that happened that hopefully shouldn't have happened to anyone, okay, in this entire process is we closed the deal in like sometime in September. The due diligence had started in May 21. I mean, not due diligence, I mean the conversations had actually started 21. And we had actually lost our accountant to COVID in April 21. Right?
Okay. Wow.
So we were in a situation where we had no freaking idea. Okay, where are the documents? Right? There was an issue with his laptop that stood up, so we didn't have his laptop, and we had to. And the timing was so perfect for the income tax department for their site to go down. I can tell you, it was a genuine sense of trust from Chargebee guys, okay, where they understood our challenge, right, and they did with whatever data we had.
Wow. And it would have been so easy for them to kind of say that, hey, get us this and then we'll.
So therefore it.
So nice.
So there's so many things that happen, okay, that you just cannot predict. And so managing all of that was far bigger challenge, and that's what I think that Rajeev mentioned, right? That a moral hazard is also that are you in all of this shit? One, are you being transparent? Okay, this is where I am really. Okay, and at the same time you are telling them all the shit that's there. Okay, in your books and everything else. And being transparent about it. And then let them take a decision what's going to happen. So I think all of this is I think a far bigger learning and challenge than some other thing that we think about. And my last point in this one is going to be, when a lot of people ask me this question, right, whenever I meet, whether at a party or my relatives or my friends, to say was this a successful acquisition? Actually this is a question that really peeves me off sometimes. Okay, because this success can be defined, it's so relative. I remember just a few months from our acquisition, Baiju acquired Akash for $1 billion, and I was like, I'm just a fraction, right? So am I successful or not? I have no. I mean, how's that? At the same time, you can also see the fact that the only 18% of all funded startups globally, okay, get even an acqui-hide exit, right? So therefore, it can be any spectrum. But I think the best way that I then describe success is 9 months post our acquisition, or maybe 12 months post acquisition. I don't remember that. When was it? We were all in Bangalore. All the team members who had joined Chargebee, we all met in Bangalore. Okay, and we were one discussion led to another, and somehow someone just asked a question. Made a statement that, hey, I've just bought a house, and we just randomly asked the question. So, how many of you guys have bought a house in the last 12 months? 60% of all the people in that room that day, okay, which is almost the entire people who got acquired, said that they had bought a house in the last 1 year.
Wow, amazing.
And the average age of that group
Yeah.
was less than 30 years.
Wow, super.
So I think, if you look that as a benchmark,
Right.
I think that's the best benchmark to
Right,
define
right.
a value creation.
Right. Absolutely.
Right? Because then it's not relative anymore.
Right.
Okay?
Absolutely.
It's the best way to describe that in this entire journey of 6 years around,
Right.
was the value created?
Right.
Right. And at least was few people the value was really good. Right? And therefore even now we didn't have a single attrition at Chargebee also of all these people who joined us.
Right.
So I think that also has been a great learning, which sort of goes back to a very important, thing that I now take back from my 6 years journey.
Right.
Okay, is you have no idea what's going to happen.
Right.
Okay, but if you can somehow peg yourself to a higher purpose. Okay, and I'm just not gyan. I'm just saying that because any kind of a benchmark or target you set for yourself, right? There's no guarantee you'll cross it or you'll meet it. Okay, or you may cross it or you may be substantial. It will not make you happy. Right. Because there'll always be something that's better than you.
Right. Correct. Like you said, $1 billion acquisition.
And therefore you just have to say what is that is going to make you happy in life. If you can figure out if everyone's going to be different.
Right.
And see if at least that is being achieved.
Right.
That sense of purpose if you can create, I think you'll be far more satisfied.
Right.
So
I'll just bring you in, right? ये ऐसा साधु तो नहीं था when he started. What has happened to him? What has happened to him? Something. No, not you.
Remember the shouting slugfest? It was me teaching him Gyan. I was doing this.
Well, I think it has to do a bit with the people around, but I'd say maybe it's after you become a father.
Yeah.
Maybe that changes.
I'm sure. No, I'm sure. I think, fabulous guys. One last question from my side, right? How did you guys celebrate the exit event, right? I think it's something that I think that'll be great for people to hear. I mean, when you've been through that journey, right? You've seen the highs and the lows and everything. Then it finally happens, right? I mean,
you know what I remember? The first celebration of which I have a photo was you, me, Adesh, our leadership team who had joined in, and I think it was also Shrey. We had gone to my wife's office, and it was to hash out something which was like. So we were supposed to have a meeting in Dubai immediately post acquisition, and we were trying to coming there to brainstorm. Bootstrapped and all that stuff, and freeloaders. So we went to my wife's office. We were there in the conference room, and they said, "Guys, have you even bloody celebrated this?" And by the way, so they like the great people they are. They have shot glasses and vodka always at their disposal. And I think that was our first, not a big bang celebration, but I think that was the first time that I remember all of us having the first shot and saying that we are cheers numbers.
Cheers, yeah.
And the second one, and I have a very bad memory, and this is what I'm able to recall. The second one was a surprise one where I think you guys had called us, the entire ISB team, and it was a cake which said numbers and a rocket ship. Numbers acquired, Chargebee,
right.
That was amazing.
That was amazing, and if I might add, हमें अभी तक treat नहीं मिली है, right? It's been so many years, right? But हमें treat नहीं मिली है. I hope I get something by after the end of this conversation. So at least, so fingers crossed. No, great guys, thank you. I mean, this has been like really amazing. Thank you for walking us through your journey, right? It's been a great journey, and I know, people sometimes kind of forget that the journey still continues, right? You're now part of Chargebee, right? And obviously you are kind of, there are certain goals and targets that you guys will be kind of, going, and like you mentioned, the idea is to still go global, right? So it's not that the journey has ended, it's just that the journey has kind of, changed, right? So all the best to you guys for your, upcoming journey. Thank you so much for your time. Any last words, anything that you would want to kind of, talk to our budding entrepreneurs about, any advice, anything?
I would just say two things. One is just go for it.
Right.
There is, I don't think that there is any right moment which will suddenly dawn upon somebody.
Right.
So long as it doesn't kill you,
right.
Just go ahead. Worst case is you will learn.
Right.
The best case is
Yeah.
Sky's the limit.
Right.
And at least to me, what it has always worked is it's never I, always a we.
Right.
There is no question about it, and we've been lucky. I think the theme across our talk has been
I know.
people,
Right.
and that's how we've been lucky, and that's what continues. So yeah, I think that's
super.
Yeah, I just think that the destination is overhyped. Okay, it's really the journey.
Right.
And I think the entrepreneurship is going to be a journey of your own self discovery and evolution.
Right.
So whether you think it's successful, not successful, doesn't make a difference. Yeah. You will be successful. Yeah. You will be far more evolved with a lot less hair.
Yeah.
You're going to have a good
less hair or grey hair.
Take your pick.
Yeah. So enjoy the journey. That's journey.
No, great guys. Thank you so much. Thank you guys for watching. And like always, please like, share, and subscribe. It's been really wonderful bringing these videos to you. And stay tuned for more. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thanks, guys.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Say something.
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 Unotumbler
तू तो सबसे पास बैठा, तेरी आवाज तो ठीक ही आएगी.
Unotumbler की जय हो.
भैया बहुत बढ़िया बन गया वीडियो. थैंक यू वेरी मच. टाटा बाय बाय. टाइम फॉर
अच्छा लगा आपसे.